What's going on, everyone? Hope everyone had a great weekend. We have another kills of the week here, along with chapter 44, 45, 46, and 47 of the Fortress of Bones. Anyways, let's get to it.
Chapter 44, The Path of Reach. The ridge still smoked where Helson had vanished, the crack in the stone seeping a faint green-gold glow that pulsed in rhythm with the orchard's distant hum. The exiles gathered, shaken but unbroken. Masks dangled from cords like relics of a life that they no longer claimed. Kale stood apart, the sword planted in the ground before him, its light dimming now that the clash was over. His chest heaved, but his eyes were fixed east, toward the shimmer they had all felt. The doorway. Lyra broke the silence first. So, what's the plan, hero? Do we go chasing trees that want to eat us? Or do we pretend none of this happened and take up farming? Kale gave her a tired smile. I don't think farming's an option anymore. Thessa stepped forward, her voice measured but firm. The orchard is changing faster than we are. If it has opened a path, it means to be walked. One of the younger exiles shifted uneasily, or it means to trap us. Everything worth remembering carries risk, Thessa said. Kale's hand tightened on the hilt of the sword. He could still feel the pendant thrumming against his chest. Not warning, not comforting, just urging. It isn't about whether the orchard wants us to go, he said slowly. It's about whether we can afford not to. That night, they made camp near the valley edge, the shimmer of the doorway glowing faintly on the horizon. No one slept well. The hum beneath the soil had grown restless, a low heartbeat that followed them into dreams. Kale dreamed of the arch of roots becoming a gate of bone and gold, light spilling through it in waves. On the other side, he saw nothing clearly, just a suggestion of waiting. When he woke, the others were already awake, staring east. None spoke, because none had to. The choice had already been made. At dawn, they gathered their packs. 8 exiles, 1 thief, 1 boy with a sword and a name that no longer belonged only to him. Together, they turned their steps toward the orchard, where the roots had bent into a doorway and a new story waited on the other side. Chapter 45, Through the Roots. The orchard waited. Its trees bent as if bowing. Branches stretched toward the arch of roots. Leaves fell in silence, not withered silver, but living green and gold, spiraling around the doorway like a crown. The air hummed expectantly. Lyra muttered, I don't like being welcomed by things that used to want to kill us. Thessa gave her a sharp glance, but said nothing. She stood before the arch, mask in hand, as though she needed to show her face before crossing. One by one, the other exiles followed her example, their masks left hanging from branches like offerings. Kale hesitated last. The sword weighed in his hand, the pendant hot against his chest. The doorway's light seemed to pulse with his heartbeat, each flare whispering one word. Enter. He drew in a long breath. Together, then, and he stepped forward. The world bent. Light poured over him, not blinding but endless, like falling through every memory ever spoken and every silence ever endured. He glimpsed flashes. Erenve planting the first tree. Vela thrashing against chains of bruising bone. Nameless bone warden standing vigil in centuries no one remembered. Then the ground steadied. They stood not in the orchard, but in a place beneath it. A cavern vast as a city. Its walls alive with roots that glowed faintly, pulsing with light as if carrying blood. Water dripped in the distance, echoing like slow, steady heartbeats. And at the cavern center stood a second arch. This one carved not by roots, but by bone. A pedestal waited within it. Upon it lay no fruit, no relic. Just a single stone tablet, blank except for 3 carved words. The binding cost. The exiles shifted uneasily. One whispered, Is this Velita's prison? No, Thessa said softly, eyes wide. This is deeper, older. This is where the binding itself is written. Kale stepped closer to the pedestal. The sword pulsed once like a breath. Lyra caught his arm. Careful. He gave a small nod. Those gaze never left the stone. Because even from a distance, he knew, whatever the cost was, it was written into him the moment he took the first bite of soul fruit. And now, the orchard meant to show him all of it.
Max. Crossing subtext.
Enemies are dropping into the area. Watch the skies.
Alright, let me know what you think of the story so far, and let me know what ideas you may have in the upcoming streams.
Not far enough.
And be sure to subscribe for of the Orchard Stones.
Page Max. Page Max.
UAV is bingo fuel. Returning to base.
Stand by.
Chapter 46, The Weight of Names. Kale stood before the tablet. Its surface was plain at first glance, chalk pale stone veined with faint gold. But as he reached out, the pendant against his chest pulsed, and the tablet answered. Words appeared in firelight script, etched across the surface not by hand, but by memory. The exile stepped back. Lyra didn't. She tightened her grip on Kale's arm, as though she could hold him to himself. The stone spoke. It told of the first orchard, not a prison, but a covenant, when Velith rose from the marrow of the earth. He carried with him every hunger the world had ever buried. His voice was so vast it drowned the names of the dead, unmaking them. Aaron Vey stood against him. But even Aaron's sword could not strike silence into that hunger. So the lore keepers wove another weapon. Memory. They bound Velith in, not chains, but roots that remembered every life he had sought to erase. Every soul that had ever been devoured was planted back into the earth, seed and fruit. Their weight pinned him. Their names smothered his hunger. But every binding demanded a cost. Aaron Vey gave a purpose, not his life, his memory of himself. He became the orchard's first fruit. His body remained, his sword endured, but the man was unmade. Only his sacrifice remained, his name tied to the root song forever. With it, others followed. The bone wardens who first stood watch, lore keepers who etched the names, even the common folk who whispered the stories to keep them alive. Each gave part of themselves, memory, voice, or lineage. That was the price of silence. The binding cost was not one man's sacrifice. It was the begetting of thousands, across centuries. And every time a soul fruit awoke, the binding shifted. It loosened, not because Velith grew stronger, but because the world itself began to remember. Kale staggered back. His chest burned with the pendant's fire. That's what I felt, he whispered. When I ate the fruit, it wasn't just Vey. It was all of them, all their names. Thessa's face was pale. If the binding breaks, Lyra cut in sharply. If the binding breaks, then maybe the world finally stops forgetting. Isn't that worth the risk? The exiles murmured, torn, but Kale could not answer, because he now knew the truth. The binding had always been about memory, and the orchard was asking him one question. Would he pay that cost? Would he give up his own name to finish what Aaron began?
You've got gas inbound. Safe zone relocated. Your squad's in the top 5.
Chapter 47, The Edge of a Name. The cavern was too still. The roots along the walls pulsed faintly, as if listening, waiting. The exiles kept their distance, some whispering prayers, others silent as statues. Only Lyra stayed near, her hand still gripping Kale's arm. Kale stared at the words burning across the stone. His name felt heavier than his sword. as though simply carry was already a burden the orchard meant to claim. Aaron Bay gave himself, Thessa said at last, voice reverent but unsteady. That was the first cost. His name lost, his memory buried, so the binding could hold. Cale shook his head. He didn't just give himself. He gave everything he was. No one remembers the man, just the sacrifice.
Max.
He touched the pendant. It throbbed with heat, each pulse whispering the same demand. Lyra leaned close, her voice sharp to cut through the weight. Don't you dare think it's that simple. You're not Aaron. You're you. Maybe that's the point, Cale said. His voice cracked on the word. Maybe the orchard wants me to be the next name buried. The youngest exile spoke up, fear playing his tone. And if you don't, if you refuse... Cale looked at the boy, then back at the tablet. Then the binding unravels, and Velith walks free. The cavern seemed to grow darker at the word, as though the very mention of the god's name stirred him in his sleep. The exile shifted uneasily. One muttered, better a boy forgotten in the world than done. Lyra's blade flashed from her belt, quick and fierce. Say it again, she hissed. Thessa raised her hand. Enough. She fixed her eyes on Cale. The choice isn't ours. The orchard has called you, not us. Cale wanted to shout, to demand why it had to be him, why a farmhand with no history of battle or blood was now carrying the weight of centuries. But he knew the answer. It wasn't about the sword. It was about his name, his story. The orchard had chosen him because he carried no legend. He could be rewritten, reshaped into whatever the binding demanded. Cale's hand trembled as he reached toward the tablet. Lyra caught his wrist, her eyes fierce. Wet with anger she refused to shed. Cale, she said, if you give up your name, who'll I curse when you're being stupid? Who'll I laugh with when the road gets too long? Who'll? Her voice broke, then steadied again. Don't you dare leave me talking to a ghost. The exile said nothing. Even Thessa lowered her eyes, because in the end, the orchard's demand was clear. It wanted his name. And Cale had to decide if he could live without himself.
Changing max.